I don't know who Mr. Earl has playing there in the background, but it's Wednesday. It's time for Rix Room, and really glad to have some live music entertainment. Sure, we'll go with that. In the background, thank you to the show producer, Mr. Earl, back there, making sure that Intellectual Radio sounds pretty good for Rix Room. Welcome, everyone, to Rix Room. I'm your host, Mr. Rick, and we're here again on this Wednesday, middle of the week. Happy Hump Day. The week we got
it's almost over.
It's almost over, and we got to make it through just a couple more days to the weekend. So I'm glad to have you here in Rix Room with myself and my guest, Mr. Vlad. We'll talk to him in just a second, but want to make sure that you're able to locate Rix Room this evening. So make sure that you're checking us out here on IntellectualRadio.com. Always glad to be a part of the IntellectualRadio.com family. You can live stream this here on YouTube as well, and even on Spreaker if you're listening live. We appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in. And if you happen to miss it tonight, you're always welcome to catch it on iHeartRadio under the podcast section. Look for Intellectual Radio Talk and check out Rix Room. We'll be there for you to take a listen to if you happen to miss it tonight. So many people are like, I don't know if I can make it on Wednesday. I might miss it on Wednesday. Well, you can always come and check it out again, either on my page here on Facebook or on iHeartRadio as well. For all of those of you who are tuning in with us live on Facebook, want to make sure we say hello to you, Facebook over there. What's going on, Facebook? Hey, good to see you. And if you're streaming live on Intellectual Radio or on YouTube, we want to look at you right there and say, what's going on? What's happening? Welcome to Rix Room. Glad you get a chance to kick it with me in the room. We're going to kick back, relax, and have a conversation about just continuing on what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. We missed last week because some of y'all were out kicking it on Blackout Wednesday. Listen, for those of you,
there.
So look, so here's the thing. Some people call it Black Wednesday. It's not Black Wednesday. I want to put this out there. It's Black Friday Wednesday. Stop shortening. It's Blackout Wednesday because it's the biggest drinking night of the year. Speaking of, we have our adult beverages ready to go. Cheers to all of you all out there. But make sure you're calling it right. It is Blackout Wednesday, the night where you just go out and get completely toe up, because all you have to do the next day on Thanksgiving is eat. I had to work, and I apologize to those of you who had to work on Thanksgiving, but I appreciate you working, especially the people out in Best Buy that was out in Oswego or the Oswego area. Maybe it was Aurora. It might have been Oswego, though. For those of you that were working at Best Buy that particular evening, I appreciate you working, and anybody else who had to work on Thanksgiving. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving, a lot of food and some relaxing time with some family and friends. Maybe you did a Friendsgiving, which was something that I learned about while I was over in New Jersey, New York, when I didn't have any family. Shout out to all my friends out in New Jersey and New York. That made me feel special and good on Thanksgiving. But if you're here in the Chicago area, again, I hope you had a relaxing and a restful Thanksgiving. Definitely want to make sure that you are tuning in with us on every Wednesday at 8 o'clock. And if you have any show ideas that you want to share to broadcast here at on Rix Room, make sure that you are shooting an email over to rixroom2. That's RIXROOM, the number 2 at gmail.com. Would love to get some ideas about a conversation that you want to have here in the room, and we're just going to kick it and talk about what we're talking about. Before I get to that, I want to let you know that this show is being sponsored today by Color Struck Polish. So listen, ladies. And again, like I said once before, maybe some gentlemen out there, if you're interested in new luxurious nail polish brand that's less harsh on your nails, make sure you're checking out Color Struck Polish. It's perfect for you. It's less toxic than some of your major market brands and doesn't leave the damaging effects of gel nails, while offering 35 eye-catching colors. Make sure you find out about the brand by visiting www.colorstruckpolish.com to find out which color strikes you. And the show is also being brought to you in part by Mind Over Matter. Some of you all remember Mr. Corky Henderson coming on the show. Mom offers holistic health and wellness services that focus on healing the whole you and soul. Remember, they're doing a promotion. Receive 20% off Refreshing Moments Simply Clean Facial and 20% off Refreshing Moments Back Treatment from now until December 23rd just by mentioning Rix Room during your initial correspondence. Check out what Mom can do for you at www.momonline.com. I actually got to check that out because I need a facial. And I could use a massage too. You know what I mean? So definitely want to check out everything that Mom has to offer, including that 20% off. Just make sure you tell them that Rix Room sent you, and you'll get that deal. Want to welcome back a friend of mine and a guest back to the show, Mr. Vlad Petrovic. Vlad, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, it's good to be back, Rick. I see you haven't cleaned your room since the last time we were here. So
listen, I tried. All right, it was the holiday week last week, so I couldn't do it.
I understand. It's always a pleasure to be back. Really hoping to have that discussion like before. I went to school on the East Coast, came back here, but I was born in hopefully looking to provide some unique perspectives.
Some very unique
perspectives on the topics that we're discussing. So.
And so for those of you who are, listen, make sure you have are you sharing the video? Because if you share the video, we can actually see what some of the Facebook comments are. We can kind of keep up. I'm going to put Vlad in charge. As some of you may know, if you're ever on the show or tuning into the show, I try to make sure my guests participate in what we do while Mr. Earl is back there chewing on some popcorn and make sure that is it chips. Oh, okay. All right. Well, he didn't bring enough off.
Talisha would like to know why you didn't open her gift.
So listen, I'm going to get to that in a second, Talisha, and I'm glad you brought her up and we were able to catch that. I'm going to get to that in a second. Vlad participated in the conversation, the initial conversation and kickoff regarding privilege. We talked about gender privilege with Talisha. And Talisha, listen, I got your gift. Shout out to Talisha Red, who hosts the show on Intellectual Radio and iHeartRadio here every other Sunday called Sister Girl Radio. She brought me a beautiful wine glass. I have it. I didn't want to break it out yet because, I want to make sure it's looking pristine before I put it on camera. But she brought me a beautiful gift. Thank you so much for that because, we have adult beverages while we're here in Rix Room. Because what we do, we have adult conversations and we have adult beverages. So shout out to Talisha Red. Thank you so much for the gift and helping me continue to ring in and promote Rix Room. I really appreciate it. Check out Talisha Red again, like I said, every other Sunday on Sister Girl Radio, tuning in here at Intellectual Radio and iHeartRadio at 1 o'clock. She has a lot of great content, a lot of great guests. I actually was a guest on her show, and that's how Rix Room actually got bored. So I appreciate it, Miss Talisha Red. Thank you so much. And
I gotta adjust the chair.
It's hard being tall.
I was born a little bit tall, yeah. So and I can't adjust the mic, so
right. So we have to adjust the chair.
Yeah,
that's what we do. So listen, tonight we're going to continue our discussion about for you all and you all about racial privilege. We started this series off, like I said, with gender privilege. Tonight, a couple of weeks ago, we had Michael Yakine on the show who talked about racial privilege with me, and now we have Vlad here to kind of continue on in that conversation. We had a lot of people that were, really they were really interested in continuing on the discussion about racial privilege. And realistically, what I'd like to do with this conversation is just get the chance to identify, what those privileges are that we may not be aware of in different communities, in different ethnicities, specifically in race. And if you want to join in the conversation, I got Vlad checking out your comments there on Facebook. Make sure you're sharing the Facebook video, if you think that this is something that your friends should be a part of. And I definitely encourage you to call in. 708-223-8953 is the number to call. Give us a call, share your comments, share some of your experiences. We had some great participation the last time we had this conversation, so why not continue on? So Vlad, let's talk about this. We work in an environment where, and this is what Michael Yakine kind of brought up, that it's an environment that we deal with other environment, people, groups, and whatnot. So, from your experiences, what are some of the privileges that because you're coming at it, you have a different perspective than I do, and we're going to talk about a little bit of my perspective a little bit later on in the show. But you have a perspective because you deal with a completely different side of that white collar, I guess, ranking. So what are some of the privileges that you come across from your perspective on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I guess if you want to identify them as privileges. I know that we had this discussion before.
Right. I completely forgot that was a conversation we had about you calling
it. I would say societal norms.
Societal norms,
what
right.
Societal norms
we're going to talk about that too in just
for
a
me,
second.
As opposed to, for example, African Americans. And, one of them is, given the benefit of the doubt, just based on, the color of my skin, as well as, a few other, you could call them privileges, but norms that are assumed, that's something that I wouldn't do, or, wouldn't be suspect to, I guess, at work, that is just completely different.
Well, and let's not look at it from what we deal with at work, but the I guess let's call it the client engagement, right? Because we are involving ourselves with engaging with individuals who are at a certain status, generally our clients or the customer base, but it's an environment where we're day to day in and out with potentially individuals who are white collar, and the perception that you may have, or that people may have of you, would of course be different, right, than the perception that they would have of me. But I think what I'm getting at is you're dealing with a completely different environment and a different I want to say, not genre, I guess a group of individuals versus the people that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. What are some of the things that I guess you don't have to worry about in your line of engagements that would be different for, say, myself, as you would call them? Because just so you all know, Vlad doesn't like to call them privileges, and we had a whole debate / conversation about the difference between privilege and what it's not, but what it is. In fact, maybe you want to share what your viewpoint is with that.
Yeah. So last time you spoke about gender, but this time specifically, when it comes to racial privileges or societal norms, it really just does depend on, in the society, on how it views either a certain class or a certain group of people, whether that's based on their heritage, their religion, or even the color of their skin. And so I wanted to bring up two examples that really kind of highlight what can be considered as racial discrimination, even though in reality it isn't.
Okay.
And the first example is the country of Liberia. So Liberia itself was created when freed American slaves had come over to Africa and created a country with laws and systems based completely on that of the United States. And these were freed African American slaves. And what they did in Liberia was different set of rules and discriminated against the local African population and ended up enslaving them.
Okay.
And so even though there was no difference in race, societal norm that they view themselves as better because they came from the US. And then a second example would be that of Nazi Germany.
Okay.
Where the idea of what a master race was someone who was blonde-haired and blue-eyed. But brown hair and brown eyes and people who were of Jewish descent, they were viewed as a completely different race, whereas in today's society, a German with blonde hair and blue eyes and a German of Jewish faith are both considered Caucasian. So,
and I think let me stop you there and just say, to give an interjection here so that viewers and listeners can understand where Vlad's coming from. Vlad is essentially,
yes,
right? So you have a perspective that extends beyond what the United States or the American perspective is, right? You have visibility and understanding of the different races and cultures that extend outside of America. So I appreciate you sharing that. I think when you bring that into perspective for other people to understand that it is societal norms, and the privileges are based on what those societal norms are, by extending that visibility to European cultures and cultures outside of America, I can understand that there are, that's the practices of. But let's keep it in regards to what we deal with on a day-to-day basis here in America, right? Because mostly because the viewers on Facebook, I'm pretty sure most of them are American. IntellectualRadio.com viewers, hey, how y'all doing? Not sure if you all happen to extend outside of America, but if you do, thanks for joining us. It's a different time zone over there where you are, so who knows what you got going on. But here in the States, right here in America, we know that there still are societal norms, as you might call them.
Right.
But given the fact that they are privileges that individuals that you don't have to be cognizant of, which is what privilege is, right? You're not even aware of the fact that you're extended, say, grace because it's a privilege, because it's something that is given to you that you're unaware of.
Well, here's my question: is it a privilege or is it racial discrimination?
It depends on I guess that really depends on the scenario or situation that you're talking about, right? So if we talk about in the workplace, and Michael and I kind of just touched on this last week, when we're talking about in the workplace, in corporate America, there are certain privileges, right, that are afforded that you could potentially consider being racial discrimination if you look at it from a different perspective. For example, if in the event, you get the opportunity to engage with white collar individuals on a day-to-day basis without any regard to the way that you speak, without any regard to your presentation, to how you're dressed, then that's a privilege that you're unaware of, versus, say, someone that might be of a person of color, Hispanic or Black descent, or ethnicity, that has to be cognizant of how I speak or how they speak, or has to be cognizant of how they dress. Yes, it could be a racially discriminatory. However, I think when we talk about privilege versus racial discrimination, they kind of go hand in hand.
Well, in a sense they do, and especially when it comes to race, because race itself is taught from, racial discrimination rather, is taught from birth. So you're taught that you're superior to a different individual.
I'm going to grab your phone over and put it in the middle, because you're not paying attention to the comments that are going on Facebook right now.
Well, it was mostly people saying hello to you. I won't say that.
Oh, nobody's saying hello.
No,
no one's saying hello on Facebook. What is this?
But,
did you share this on your page? All right. Well, whatever.
Yeah. What I did want to say is, I don't believe that there is a difference between racial discrimination and privilege, because, especially in the workplace, those who allot privilege based on race are inherently racially discriminating against those who are not of that same race, who are acting on their personal racial discrimination against either a person who is of different race to them, or elevating someone or giving certain privileges to someone who is of the same race to them. But it's not because of just the general color of their skin. It's because that individual was raised to believe that. He was raised to believe that they were superior to other individuals based on their color of skin.
So when it comes to how individuals are raised based on their ethnicity, I'd have to agree that there are certain things that are instilled in races, whether it's a mentality of eliteness or superiority, or if it's a mentality of I have to compete with said eliteness and superiority, right?
Right.
You definitely get that at birth and through your being raised and whoever is raising you. I wonder, and if I got some viewers that are out there, it'd be great to hear from you if you happen to have been a person of color raised in a white household, or vice versa, if you were white raised in a person of people of color. Is that how we would call that? People of color household?
I guess.
Yeah, I don't want to call it minority, because I'm pretty sure the minorities are now the majority. But anyway, if you were raised in a household that was outside of your ethnicity, I'd love to hear from you and what your perception has been. 708-223-8953. Go ahead and give us a call and share your experiences of what that's like and what you had to deal with growing up in that household. But you're right, it definitely is something that it comes from an installation while you're being raised.
Yeah, and on that topic as well, when you're looking at the genetic difference between you and I, they're very minor.
Well, you stand 6'5", right?
Well, yeah, of course.
So
no,
there's
6'4", but
whatever.
And of course, son, and it's a little bit different.
Wait, is that a thing for Europeans too?
Yeah,
I guess that's where that came from.
Of course, Northern Europeans more so than Southern Europeans.
Are you Northern European, or
no,
you're
I'm
more
Southern European?
Are you really?
Yeah, we're closer to the Mediterranean.
I was gonna say you look like darker features, so
yeah.
Do you burn though?
If I stay out long enough, but then after that, it tends to be a pretty steady tan.
Anybody generally burns if they're out too long. I mean, even blacks, even black people, we burn. If we're not careful, we'll be out in the sun too long, we actually burn. But it is a thing, y'all. Just so y'all know, it is a thing. It takes a little bit more time. For Vlad here, it only needs 5 minutes. But for black people, a good couple of hours, we still burn. But
5 minutes, yeah, just about. But there's relatively very little differences between us, but it's that instillment. And you brought up a very important subject when you said, I have to mind the way I talk, I have to mind the way what I wear, how I act.
Sure. Well, you do because you're European.
Well, of course, but
right.
I think that everyone, in a sense, does it. In a sense, it also highlights one of the biggest problems about racial discrimination is that when one race or group of individuals decides that they are better than the other, they're going to do everything in their power to spread those fallacies, right?
What do you mean?
They're going to lie.
What do you mean?
They're going to say, "Oh, I'm better than you just because I have blue eyes and you don't have blue eyes. So why don't you have blue eyes, Rick?" That's something that's wrong with you.
Well, my father's really light-skinned, and I think he might have some mixed descent in his lineage, so I should have had blue eyes.
Yeah.
Or maybe green.
And and I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a study of, I think it was a school in Alaska, of grade school children, right?
Okay.
And it was a psychological study, and they wanted to show how race is taught and that it's not inherent, right? The discrimination.
Okay.
What those to do was, I think at first they decided to focus on blue-eyed kids.
Okay.
And they said blue-eyed, and the teacher kept telling these kids, blue-eyed kids are the best grades. They sat up in front. Brown-eyed kids had to sit in the back. They were discriminated against in class, right? And blue-eyed kids will call the brown-eyed kids names just based on the color of their eyes.
Right.
And then halfway through, they flipped it around on them. And I still remember this image, and it's a video you can find on YouTube as well. I think you could just look up blue-eyed kids discrimination.
Okay.
Psychological case. Brown-eyed kids are the best. So now they got to sit up front, play with all the toys.
I feel like I remember that.
And the blue-eyed kids sat in the back. And the culture completely flipped just because, that's the way the teacher decided to act.
Right, right. And I feel like I remember hearing that or seeing that too, that study once before. I believe we have a caller here on the line, so let's check it out. Welcome to Rix Room. Thanks for calling in. You're on the line with Rick and Vlad. Who's calling in?
Hey, Rick. It's Angelo. How are you, my friend?
Hey, Angelo. What's going on? How are you?
I'm doing very well. Let's get the pleasantries out of the way first. How you been? How's things?
And so, for those of you that's watching, Angelo and I go way back to, for anybody that's watching and knows where Eden's Lanes is, we go all the way back to when it was Club E. Glad to have you on, Angelo. Thanks for calling in, man. I've been good. How have you been? So you're out west somewhere now, aren't you?
Indeed, I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona now, my friend.
Look at that. Scottsdale, Arizona, calling all the way in.
Pastures or drier pastures, depending on how you want to frame it.
Yeah, drier pastures and sinuses and whatever else, but we'll take it. That's fine. You liking it out there, man? Things are good for you?
Yeah, I do really appreciate the atmosphere out here. It just is a living and whatnot, and it's just a little more conducive to my life goals, if you will.
Well, good.
Yes, I'm enjoying it.
Good. So what's going on, sir? I know you said that you wanted to call in and share your opinion. Talk to us. What's going on? What do you have to say about racial privilege?
Well, in order to bottleneck it a little bit, and I'll try not to get too long-winded as I usually am, and try not to digress too much, but just to give your listeners a little bit of an idea, because obviously they don't know me. By political affiliation, I'm definitely a libertarian. Economically conservative, socially very liberal. Come from two immigrant parents. I'm a first-generation person, such as yourself, Vlad, I believe, if I heard that correctly. And, most definitely don't subscribe to a specific religion. So,
with all that said,
in Chicago, just outside the city in Westchester, and, we're fellow Chargers, you and I, but I actually just finished up at Proviso West. So
we won't tell anybody that. We'll go with the St. Joe's Chargers and keep that one there. That's fine.
Exactly. So, I mean, I find myself in a place where I'm trying to engage different opinions and different attitudes and people from different parts of the country as far as their take on this particular subject, which is racial privilege, if we so choose to call it that. And I'm a very rational thinker, and I think there's more of us out there than people want to acknowledge, that we try to approach things from that type of a standpoint. And, okay, present facts that are irrefutable. Okay, I mean these are completely unbiased facts from things like the Pew Reports, other websites such as that, and other information is gathered in such a fashion. And I say, look, I'm not standing here from a point of I know your strife. I can't, right? I can't walk in your shoes.
Right.
I haven't walked in your shoes, but I have been a person able to witness it firsthand, not me specifically, but the people that I know. And growing up in a very diverse city such as Chicago, our great Chi-Town, and don't get me wrong, I still have a lot of love for Chi-Town. The wall that I usually run into is that the wall that gets thrown up is, well, you can't walk in our shoes because you're not black. And I get that. And I'm not saying I don't. But what I always try to do is find a common ground in order for us to build a dialogue, right?
Correct.
Let's find something that we both agree upon and open those doors.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you notice, a lot of the time your conversations will digress when it comes to where we disagree into a plethora of different tangents, right? So why can't we use the same philosophy in finding out where we agree to build that conversation into other conversations where we can actually come together in dialogue and agree upon certain things? That's the difficulty that I run into.
Okay. Okay. And you know what, Angelo, and I appreciate you calling in, man. Thank you so much for sharing that opinion and that question, because that actually came up. Funny enough, sometimes I'll do a after or post show in actual Rix Room where I was at in my apartment, and my guest the couple of weeks ago that we were on, Mike, he came back and we kind of had a real in-depth conversation, and he had a very similar question, if you will, or perspective, in that why is it that we can't find that common ground? And one of the things that I told him, Angelo, and I think that I don't want to speak for everybody, but I'll speak for the bulk of the community, any community, when I say this, is that it's not about and this is just my perspective and opinion, but I share this with some people. It's not about the fact that we can't. It's not about the fact that we don't or shouldn't find that common ground. In fact, if you're coming across or running into individuals that you can't find that common ground with, stop talking to them. Have the mental capacity, they don't have the intelligence or bandwidth to be able to indulge in such an educated conversation and move past it. But I do say coming in contact with and engaging into these types of conversations allows us to first off identify where we are, because we can't progress forward, we can't move forward if we can't even identify where we are. Yes, right, and then move past that. So I completely understand where you're coming from, man. You're absolutely right. We definitely need to be able to find that common ground, but we also need to identify where we are, what those differences are, and then progress from there. You know what I mean?
I'm going to piggyback on what you're saying right there.
Yeah.
So here's where, if you ask me as well, where the discrepancy lies, okay? Someone such as myself, okay, and those that think like me, if you will, able to approach something from a very rational standpoint, allow emotion to invade the conversation, and that's where a lot of people go wrong, is the way I'll put it, is that you got to check your emotion at the door when you're dealing with a very serious problem, very serious issue.
Sure.
No one is denying, most specifically myself, that the issue doesn't exist, okay? The issue exists.
Right.
Now what we should be talking about, right, we've established that, as you said, is to what degree are we speaking, okay?
Right.
And some of the things that I try to highlight in conversation, I literally just had dare I say, a Facebook conversation, which if you've done it long enough, you'll realize it's futile, to say the least.
It really is.
I became engaged in a conversation with somebody from Los Angeles, California, a very, very well spoken young African American woman, black woman, depending however you want to put it, on a specific topic. Okay, and I says, okay, fine. All right, this does happen, okay, but the perception that is out there that is being spread, most specifically from the media itself, okay, because this is what they do, right? They want a race-based. Encourage it, in fact, because what does it mean to them? It means viewership. And about viewership, they have no advertisers. Without advertisers, they have no TV support, okay?
Right.
I don't believe, excuse me, sorry, my allergies are really acting up.
Because you're in out there in Arizona, sure, of course they are.
That it is to the extent at which the media wants us to believe. Okay.
Sure.
Well, you and I actually had a quick discourse a few months ago on Facebook, in regards to, if you recall, in regards to applying for a position at a steakhouse. Remember, we were talking about this. We both come from that background.
Yep, I remember that.
In that industry. And yeah, you remember the facts that I presented in the order in which it is you are to go about trying to obtain such a position.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
If those things are followed, okay, in that manner, and you still run into a wall of somebody that is literally, sheerly just not hiring you based upon the color of your skin, please point that out if you happen to come across it. But please do not approach in such a fashion of well, I don't have the resume, I don't have the experience. Well, of course you're not going to be hired in that arena. Guess what? I wish I was tough, but guess what? I don't have an IT background. Okay, so there's that, right? I mean, for a little levity. So you see what I'm saying when it comes to that conversation.
Right.
And it's emotion is what it is. It's emotion that gets involved. And really quickly here, just to give you another perspective and an idea as far as where I'm coming from. And I read and listen to everybody from Christopher Hitchens to Sam Harris to Ben Shapiro to Ayn Rand to Norman Mailer to Larry Elder. I mean, I'm across the board.
Okay.
The worst thing you can do is limit yourself to one perspective.
Very big libertarian.
Right?
Yeah, he is.
I listen to people on the left. I listen to people on the far right.
Right.
I listen to centrists. I listen to fellow libertarians such as myself to really get a good grasp as far as what's really out there.
Right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I find a fundamental flaw with both of your arguments in that you focus on the present. And when you look at the most famous speech by Dr. Martin Luther King, it was, "I have a dream," which focused on the future. And I think that when you look at the present and you want to point fingers and you want to say, well, this is wrong and this is wrong, and you should fix this and you should fix that, I think that's a completely negative way of solution, and instead focusing on what the future should be like and training both yourself, how you act, and how and teaching your children how to act as well to have that dream come into fruition.
Well, okay.
To eliminate that racial discrimination. Because if you look in the present, as much as we want to change, what the present circumstances are, it's very hard to teach that old dog new tricks.
Right.
So, grounded in your beliefs you are, and the less likely that you are to change your views on something.
Okay.
And I think that we need to focus on the youth and the children in order to move forward past that.
Well, I think that Angelo, again, I appreciate you calling in, man. Thank you so much for sharing your opinion. Listen, make sure you take care of yourself out there. Give me a holler when you're coming back into Chicago, okay? We definitely got to hit up Club.
But I will.
We got to hit up Club E again. I'm probably not going to come to Arizona, but next time you're in town when it's warm, I'll let you know.
All right, brother. Take it easy.
Thanks for calling in, Angelo. Take care, man. Definitely think that shout out to Angelo for calling in. He's a really good friend, and we did have a conversation very recently, a couple of months back, about where the topic of discussion actually was revolving around blacks and people of color getting jobs in steakhouses, and the lack of the ability for if you go to any Chicago-based steakhouse, any old school Chicago steakhouse, you wouldn't find any blacks working there, and there's a whole history behind that. And he presented some very good arguments on, and being in the restaurant industry and having spent 16 years in the restaurant industry, I understood where he was coming from, and we just had a great dialogue about the perspective, the situation, the environment, a lot of different factors that go into why that could potentially be a possibility, but not excluding that there are certain privileges that are given or racial discriminations that are extended or biased because of the industry.
Are inherently racist.
Well, probably. But before we continue
so they're discriminating against different people of different races just based on the color of their skin, because that's their individual choice to do so.
And it's the Chicago steakhouses, right? They're Chicago steakhouses, so they're highly Italian. And no shade to any of my Italian and Sicilian good friends. I love you all. But that's the industry dynamic, right? In that particular regard. But before we go on, I just want to make sure that I get a chance to let you all know that this show is also being sponsored by the Bureau Bar. Bureau Bar is still doing Sunday's Affair. Make sure you get a chance to go over there and check out Jeff Timms offering craft cocktails, located at 75 East 16th from 3 to 12. They got a happy hour going on from 3 to 5. And listen, I haven't gotten there yet, but I promise I'm going to get there to check this out. If you happen to get to Bureau Bar on Sundays for Sunday's Affair, make sure you tell them that Rix Room sent you. If you do, you'll get half off your first round. They got happy hour going on from 3 to 5. Soulful music stylings from Fathom DJ starting at 5. And then they have one of our other sponsors in the building, the Cookout on Wheels, from 6 to 9. Again, mention Rix Room at the bar and get half off your first drink. Sunday's Affair at the Bureau Bar. Speaking of the Cookout on Wheels, now check this out. Parties, have the Cookout on Wheels cater your food for the festivities with choices like barbecue pulled pork, deep fried turkey, and 6 cheese mac, or even peach cobbler pound cake. Yo, she said peach cobbler pound cake, and I was like, I gotta check this out. Peach cobbler pound cake, all of those things, you can customize your own menu. Just call the Cookout on Wheels at 630-708-7820, or visit thecookoutonwheels.com with any questions. And they're running a promotion as well. You can receive 10% off if you're one of the first 10 bookings for December. This is the best time to get them for your holiday events. Find them on Facebook and message online, or again, give them a call at 630-708-7820. That's the Cookout on Wheels. Hashtag friends fed here. A lot of their food I enjoy with what the Cookout on Wheels does and the creations that they come up with. And the Bureau Bar, definitely got to make sure I get a chance over there to check them out, and their Sunday's Affair for their happy hour. Who does a happy hour on Sunday but the Bureau Bar? Like, there's a happy hour on a Sunday. I don't know if you all get a chance to check out happy hours on Sunday.
If I'm not working Monday, then...
Well, I mean, but it's from 3 to 5, so it's not like we have to be back in the office. We get some sleep before we have to be in the office on a Monday.
Yeah, but the next day, you feel groggy.
Listen,
I'm at that age still.
I'm with you. The Monday blues, please, at that age. You still got time that you can
back
get
in college, you could drink all night, wake up the next day, run a 5K, but these days, I wake up and I feel like I need an IV.
I couldn't do that in college, let alone now. So we're talking about racial privilege, guys. If you are looking to share your opinion, get involved in the conversation, make sure that you're commenting on Facebook here on the video. Share the video on your page, or give us a call, 708-223-8953. Give us your opinions and your comments or experiences about racial privilege. I want to flip the script a little bit and talk about, while we're talking about racial privilege, and give some perspective. So there are privileges that are extended in my realm as a black man as well. If in the event I happen to be, and this could potentially be a situation of racial profiling, but, if in the event I happen to be, and no shade to the West Side or the South Side or even North Pole, I grew up on the West Side, but if I'm involved or if I'm engaged in, an environment where it's conducive and it's predominant environment, then there are certain privileges that I'm extended that you don't necessarily get a chance to partake in. Right. The situations and scenarios get flipped. But I'm curious, Vlad, because you've been involved in a lot of things. Like you've seen a lot of things. You've experienced a lot of things. What in all of your 12 years of living? So okay, maybe 16, whatever. Vlad's younger, but he's really not that much younger than I am. However, have you ever been in a situation or a scenario where you were the minority? Yeah, what was that like?
Well, in college for a brief period of time, I volunteered for an after-school program in Anacostia in D.C., which is predominantly African-American. And it was a very different experience because, cars would roll up and they would look at me weird, like, what was I doing here? This wasn't my neighborhood. I would get those types of experiences. And it was a very big culture shock coming from, I'd grown up in the suburbs, and was born in a very homogeneous society. And then to come, to the U.S., that's where I truly felt like.
Okay.
And when you mentioned, how I act, how I dress, how I talk.
Only in regards to it, like in the
it did feel like that. No, even then, when I had to go there every day, essentially, it did feel very different because I had to be self-conscious of what I wore. Right. Because I would always think, am I wearing something that looks too white?
Right. Right. And you might have been, knowing you.
No, yeah.
You probably were.
In that sense, it did make me feel very self-conscious. But I think it's not just, me being self-conscious about my race, but rather me acknowledging the culture that I was entering at the point. So it's a very different culture from Northwestern DC to Anacostia, for example.
I don't know where Anacostia is.
It was in DC.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Right.
Shout out to all the DMV fans
DMV,
watching.
yeah.
All the DMV people out there watching.
It was a very different experience, but it was my race that I was self-conscious about, but more rather conscious about the culture that I was entering and acknowledging what cultural norms that, setting or place that were different from where I was coming from.
So talk to me about how you navigated through that. Like, what mentally did you have to prepare for, or how did you prepare for that once you got exposure and understanding of this is a different environment, this is a different, engagement that I'm the minority. What did you do to navigate through that?
I would say that initially, beforehand, I got myself worked up about it, but within the first hour, I guess I'm just a pretty confident guy, but it kind of melted away.
For those of you that know Vlad, he's not really confident at all. It's not true.
No, not at all. But it melted away, and I was able to be myself regardless of whatever situation I was in or whatever place I was in, because I acknowledged that people are going to accept me either for who I am or they're just not going to accept me at all. And there's nothing that I can do in my control to tell them, no, you need to accept me for X, Y, Z. No. Either they like me for who I am or they just don't like me. And there's nothing that, I can do. My actions, can speak for themselves, but nothing that I can do to change their preset minds unless they themselves change them.
So that's a very interesting point that you bring up. And this I'll share personally, the difference maybe between you as well as myself. Let's translate that into what we do day to day in our career and our responsibilities and what we do at work. So for you, the mindset became, you're just going to have to accept me for who I am, or move on with it. And that's definitely a confidence that, I'm glad that you were able to get to. I think that definitely, it's something that individuals, that confidence is something that people should have. Right. Yeah. Now, maybe for me, it might have been a little bit different, but I still had to be cognizant of, I want to be able to say, you're going to accept me for who I am.
Right.
But I know in the industry, and I'm going back to the workplace, I know in the industries that I deal with, or the type of individuals that we come in contact with on a day-to-day basis, I can't say necessarily that you're going to accept me for who I am and expect that to transcend into being successful. Whereas I think and again, it could be my ignorance, but I'm thinking the difference between white and black or predominant white versus predominant people of color, we would like to say, you're going to accept me for who I am. But because we're not in the majority, because we're not in the seat of power, if you will, then I can't say you're going to accept me for who I am. I have to then find a way to accommodate. I have to find a way to navigate that, the perspective of who I am as a person, right? And then to an individual so that I can be able to get that person to like me. Whereas that's something you don't have to worry about. Right.
So, ultimately it might not be something that I have to worry about, but it is when it comes to personality or, the way I act around different individuals that might be appealing to one manager that just isn't appealing to a different one.
Right.
And I think that you brought up two very important topics. One of them is self-defeatism. So before you go into a situation, you already set yourself up for failure just based on certain, either on the color of your skin or, they're going to think differently of me because I'm African American, and, they might not accept me. And that plays a role into when you're interviewing a different individual. And the second thing is the racial discrimination. So if you and I were both equal candidates with an equal amount of experience, right? But I have been going from job to job and, skipping around, whereas you have not only been very successful in one company, you were successful in a different company too. And I'm unemployed and you're employed, but we have the same amount of experience, but you're ultimately more successful and your resume does reflect that. And we go both going to interview, very confident. And the manager chooses me just based on, the color of my skin. That's not a manager you want to work for. So he's making a bad bad economic decision just based on his feelings of, race.
And here's why I call this privilege, because but
it could work the other way as well.
Well, but so your example that you provide gives in the scenario, the manager picking you because of the color of your skin, right?
Yeah.
It's a very realistic, right? It's a very realistic scenario, and it's a very realistic ideology that could potentially be a thing.
Yeah.
And if in the event you and I were going into it with the same setup, right, and we're going into an interview, or we're going into an opportunity to be successful with whatever it is that we're doing, you don't have to worry about it. In fact, it might not even faze you that you potentially could be in a situation where you might not get this position. Whereas for me, it's something that I'm constantly thinking of. Now,
and that's part of that self-defeatism.
But you bring up the self-defeatism. Now, that's only because that's the way that the cards have been stacked against, such as myself as the black man, right? Those cards have already been stacked up. So how can I not be cognizant of the fact that these cards are already stacked up against me? It's not necessarily self-defeatism. It's a reality that I have to be cognizant of going into that situation. Whereas you don't necessarily have to worry about that. That hasn't been your situation or your circumstances up until that point. Now, maybe.
But it might be if I went into, for example, minority-owned firm.
Oh, yeah, you're right. So switching up, and I said this earlier that I wanted to make sure I got that out there. If in the event that the cards were different and you were going into a minority firm, potentially it could be a thing that you would have to be cognizant of.
Right.
Has that ever been a case for you? Have you ever gone into a minority firm like that?
I don't know if I have, but but if I love the show Insecure. And
right. We talked about this.
Yeah.
Shout out to Issa Rae. We talked about this once before on the show. Insecure is everything.
If you look at where Issa works, it's
So if you were
if I was in her situation, it's like a boss that thinks she understands but just doesn't understand. And you look at all the people that she hires, they're predominantly white people. Like the one that they always go to for advice. And if it's a form of discrimination that her boss exhibits, that they might be more successful or whatnot based on her like racial discrimination within there.
Right.
And so I think that's a prime example of of being insecure in the workplace because of certain things that are just going on. Or certain cultural norms that are accepted in one way.
Here we go back to the societal norms and cultural norms.
It is what it is,
Well,
as much as we want to say that they are privileges, they are not. Because privileges are fluid, but societal norms are fluid as well, and privilege changes as well.
Well, so again, you're calling it societal norms, I guess, could potentially be a thing,
right?
But I think that what's important is again going all the way back to identifying the reality of, right? Identifying where we are as a society. Societal norms, we'll call it societal norms, that's fine. But identifying where we are as a society, understanding that, and being able to converse past that, and being able to identify where we are and move past that, progress past that, is what's important.
Right.
In Insecure. Well, and this is a conversation I want, just so you all know, on Facebook, Intellectual Radio, and YouTube. Rix Room will be talking about diversity in the workplace. That's something that is a topic we're going to be talking about here very soon, because it's definitely a conversation that we need to have when it comes to what's out there, what the perspective is, and what the thought is, what the process. I mean, the realization is. Companies out there think that they are diverse, right? They think that they do have a culture of diversity, but in fact, they really don't. Right. So when we talk about Issa and where she was in the company that she was in versus what the reality of that culture was, or that company culture was, it really wasn't the same. But
I can, remember that one scene where they're trying to decide what they want the kids to do. The one guy goes, I took African interpretive dance for one semester. Right. Just take him to the beach.
To the beach. Right.
Yeah.
Have you got Are you on this past? Did you finish the past season?
I did. Yeah.
The last.
It's a great show.
It is a great show. And it
provides a lot of self-perspective as well. Coming from white man.
I was gonna say, does that really provide perspective
definitely.
for you?
Yeah.
Well, then again, shout out to Issa Rae and the cast over at Insecure for allowing Vlad and white men to actually understand where they are in society.
Well, no, I wouldn't say where, but what the societal norms are.
What the societal norms are. Well, you know what? Let me wrap it up with this. I think that it's definitely a conversation, right, that we definitely need to have moving forward. But I'm glad you were able to tune in with with us on Facebook. Tune in with us on Intellectual Radio. And Vlad, again, I appreciate you coming on the show, man. It's always a pleasure to have you talking about these privileges or societal norms. Societal norms. Sure, we'll call it that moving forward. Societal norms is what we're calling it. Definitely special thanks to Our Young Enterprises for producing Rix Room. Our Young Enterprises providing resources for performance and production engagements, artistic development, personal image consulting, and one-on-one life coaching. You can also reach out to schedule catering for your upcoming holiday events. Go ahead and contact Al at 773-220-9869 or email Al Young III. That's Al Young III. For those of you that know Roman numerals, Al Young III. That's III at me.com. Shout out to Our Young Enterprises. Whatever you do, do it with passion. Again, thanks for tuning in here on IntellectualRadio.com. Thanks for tuning in to us on YouTube and you all out there on Facebook. Making way for my girl Dana B. Dana showing up here. Make sure you tune in to her on Intellectual Radio. If you happen to miss the show tonight, you can always catch it on iHeart under the podcast section. Check it out, Rix Room under Intellectual Radio Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in to Rix Room. I'm your host, Mr. Rick. We'll see you next Wednesday at 8 p.m. sharp. Thank you.